Right, so I want you to just imagine you're standing there.
Yep.
It is 1923.
Oh, here we go.
No, seriously, hear me out. You have absolutely no modern technology at your disposal.
Right.
There are no drones. There is no computer-generated imagery. And some madman director decides he wants to film a massive, chaotic riot.
Well, I mean, you barely have reliable electricity in half the places you were trying to work back then.
Exactly. And how does he do it? I was looking at the production notes in cinema. The magic vehicle for early films like The Wheel. And the sheer mechanical insanity of it is just staggering.
It is a bit much.
They strapped a massive, heavy, hand-cranked camera to a wooden carousel, a literal merry-go-round.
Yeah, which is a terrible idea on paper.
They built these makeshift wooden tracks, shoved this spinning contraption down the line, and relied entirely on actual physical sunlight to capture the blur of human panic.
And shadows. Don't forget the shadows.
Right, the shadows. By all the laws of early physics, the camera should have smashed to pieces, the film should have jammed, should have been a complete disaster.
It usually was a disaster, let's be honest.
Yet it worked. When you watch that footage, you are seeing the literal birth of visual language being forged out of wood and glass.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
It is properly genius. It is pure magic.
Hold on a second. Stop right there.
What?
You are romanticizing this entirely. You have got this golden, nostalgic, rose-tinted lens glued to your face.
I am just looking at the facts of the production.
Properly genius, you say. Pure magic. Let me paint the actual picture for you, and for anyone listening right now, try to actually put yourself in 1923.
I just did.
No, you put yourself in a fantasy.
Yeah.
We are talking about a world choked by coal smog.
Well, yeah, it was industrial.
We are talking about an era where the average person going to see these films was hungry, freezing, and exhausted. The political climate globally was an absolute shambles coming out of the First World War.
I am not denying the historical context.
Cinema back then wasn't some elevated, pristine art form where visionaries sat around in berets pondering the human condition. It was a circus tent.
Well, that's rubbish, mate, and you know it.
It was a penny arcade attraction. Cinemas were often just converted damp storefronts that smelled of wet wool and unwashed bodies. They were showing cheap thrills for people who couldn't afford a proper theater ticket.
You can't just dismiss the sheer ingenuity of what they were physically building just because the cinema smelled a bit off.
I am not dismissing the fact that they built a wooden track. I am saying you are completely ignoring the reality of the era to prop up this ridiculous idea of the pure art taste.
Okay, let me jump in, because you are missing the point entirely.
Am I?
Yes. Because, yes, the world was a bit dodgy. The whole globe was dealing with the catastrophic trauma of the war. But that is exactly what makes the art of the time so brilliant.
Oh, right. The old suffering breeds art argument.
The extreme limitations were the playground. They had to invent the rules because there were no rules. And that brings us exactly to the main battleground today.
Here it comes.
Because if you want to talk about profit-driven scrambles versus pure, unyielding artistic ambition, we are going to look at 1925. We have to talk about King Vidor's The Big Parade.
Right. The big parade, the untouchable sacred cow.
It deserves to be.
Yeah.
Look at the actual footprint of this thing. 1925, an MGM production, produced by Irving Thalberg.
Thalberg, yes. The ultimate studio man.
This film wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural earthquake. It became the second highest grossing silent film in history, right behind The Birth of a Nation.
Which is saying something about what audiences wanted to see.
Now, when I look at the history of this, I see an absolutely brilliant cultural touchstone. Why? Because this was the very first time a true, unflinching portrayal of modern war appeared on the screen.
You can't be serious, unflinching.
It was totally free from romantic adventure. It was free from preachy polemics. Vidor somehow managed to capture the absolute raw trauma of an entire generation, and he did it purely through visual storytelling.
Are you joking? Did you really just say it was free from polemics? A cultural touchstone of objective truth.
Yes. It was the first time they stripped away the glory and just showed the trenches exactly how they were.
Nonsense. It was a highly calculated corporate product cashing in on a very specific, very lucrative political mood.
Oh, come on.
No, you have to look at the actual context of the United States, 1925. You just mentioned the trauma of the war. Well, what was the political reality on the ground?
People were tired of fighting.
You had violently rising isolationist feelings. The American public and the government absolutely refused to join the League of Nations.
Right, the isolationist movement was massive.
They wouldn't even touch the International Court of Justice. You had massive social organizations running around explicitly lobbying and proclaiming that war was, quote, an outrage against the law of nations.
I am not disputing the historical facts of the isolationist movement.
The public was already fiercely, exhaustedly anti-war. So King Vidor making a film that essentially says war is bad isn't him being some brave, lone visionary speaking truth to power.
He wasn't trying to be a politician.
He wasn't challenging the audience. He was validating them. He was printing money.
Wait. You are completely undercutting the director's own stated intention.
Right.
Vidor explicitly went on the record to declare that he was, quote, not a pacifist.
Oh, how convenient.
He didn't want to make a propaganda film for either side. He saw his role specifically as a moderator.
A moderator, right.
He wasn't taking a party line in the isolationist dispute. He was just trying to tell a story objectively with almost clinical indifference about an ordinary bloke who gets caught up in a machine he doesn't understand.
That is incredibly naive.
I think that is a massive, crucial distinction. Think about it. If you were a photojournalist embedded in a war zone today, your job isn't to be a pacifist or a warmonger.
That is entirely different.
Your job is to point the lens, keep your feelings out of it, and show the bloody truth. That is what Vidor was doing.
Moderator. I love that word. It is incredibly convenient, isn't it?
It's descriptive.
To claim you are a humble moderator, while you are simultaneously raking in the biggest box office receipts in the world by showing war atrocities to an intensely isolationist public act that is dodgy in places.
It's not dodgy to be successful.
To me, claiming you are not a pacifist but just a neutral observer is a cowardly way to avoid taking real political responsibility.
That's rubbish, mate.
You profit off the trauma of the First World War. You sell millions of tickets to grieving families, but you wash your hands of the message. Oh, I am just holding the camera. It's incredibly cynical.
You are the one being cynical. A moderator steps back so the subject can speak for itself. The message was clear without him having to preach.
But the message was preaching.
And that is what makes it art instead of propaganda. When you are forcing a specific political agenda down an audience's throat, when you are telling them exactly how to vote or what policy to support, that is propaganda.
Yes.
And you just show a man going to the front line, and you vividly show what happens to his fragile human body and his mind when heavy artillery hits. That's art. The horror speaks for itself.
But the message was propaganda. It just happened to perfectly align with the propaganda of the isolationist organizations of the time.
Aligning with a mood doesn't make it a pamphlet.
Look, if the major political organizations of the day are handing out pamphlets saying war is an outrage, and you make a massive blockbuster film showing war is an outrage, but you claim, oh, I'm just an objective moderator, you are having your cake and eating it too.
I reckon you are fundamentally misunderstanding what an audience actually wants.
Yep.
And frankly, what makes people leave their homes to sit in a dark room?
To have their own opinions fed back to them.
They didn't just go because the film agreed with their local politician. They went because it was an astonishing, groundbreaking piece of cinema. And if we look at the sheer monumental scale of the production...
The production that was heavily interfered with by the studio, you mean. Let's talk about that scale.
You can't be serious. You're going to drag the studio into this to undermine it.
Absolutely I am. Look at the credits. This isn't just King Vidor's pure, unadulterated journalistic vision. It is an MGM product, produced by Irving Thalberg.
Who was a visionary producer.
Thalberg was a notoriously ruthless executive who cared about pacing and box office, not artistic purity. Let's look at the actual numbers for a second.
Numbers don't dictate art.
The original cut of this film, Vidor's Vision, was 3,825 meters long. Do you know what the final released length was after the studio got their hands on it?
3,511 meters. Yes, I read the same book.
Right. 3,511 meters.
Right, they tightened it. That happens on literally every film ever made.
They didn't just tighten it, mate. They slashed over 300 meters of film. Let me break down what that actually means, because numbers on a page don't do it justice.
It's just editing.
In the 1920s, film was projected at variable speeds, usually around 16 to 24 frames per second. 300 meters is roughly 1,000 feet of celluloid.
Okay, doing the math.
That translates to anywhere from 10 to 14 minutes of actual screen time. That is a massive chunk of narrative real estate left on the cutting room floor.
10 minutes is nothing in an epic.
This proves that Irving Thalberg and the MGM executives were acting as corporate butchers. Whatever pure, unflinching journalistic vision you think Vidor had, it was processed, sanitized, and packaged by men in suits.
That is so unfair to the collaborative process.
And furthermore, look at the script. Harry Benn wrote it, right?
Harry Benn wrote the script.
But it was based on Lawrence Stallings' play What Price Glory? Now, Stallings actually lived through the war. He lost a leg at Belleau Wood.
I know the history of Stallings, yeah.
He based the play on his real, visceral war experiences. So Hollywood didn't even organically conjure up this masterpiece. They just bought a gritty, real story from a traumatized veteran on the stage, watered it down by hacking out 12 minutes of it, and sold it to an isolationist public.
You're unbelievable.
It is not an original masterpiece. It is a corporate adaptation.
That is such a spectacularly uncharitable way to view the collaborative nature of filmmaking. You are looking at a 10-minute reduction and screaming butchery.
Because it is.
Do you know how physical film editing actually works? Hugh Wynn was the editor. He was an absolute master. Sometimes you cut things because they simply do not work on screen.
Or because the studio wants more screenings per day.
Sometimes a scene drags. Sometimes a transition is clumsy. If they left every single frame of that 3,825 meters in, you'd be sitting here right now complaining that the film was a bloated, self-indulgent mess.
But 300 meters in a silent film where visual storytelling is all you have is massive. What did they cut? Did they cut the rough edges? Or did they cut the politics that made MGM nervous?
They likely cut it to heighten the emotional impact of what remained. Because what remained is staggering. You want to talk about MGM being a restrictive bean-counting factory.
Yes, I do.
Let's talk about the absolute ambition they poured into this. There are two sequences in this film shot in Technicolor. In 1925.
Oh, here we go with the technical marvels.
Think about it. We are talking about the silent era. Directors were still struggling with the absolute basics of cinematic lighting, just trying to get a clear image on black and white orthochromatic film.
It wasn't the Dark Ages.
And MGM is experimenting with Technicolor to bring the reality of war to life.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't modern Technicolor. This was early, two-strip Technicolor.
A complete gimmick.
To get that to work, you needed a camera with a massive glass prism inside it to split the light beam onto two separate strips of film, one with a red filter, one with a green filter.
Which looked dreadful half the time.
And because the filters ate up so much light, you had to blast the set with an insane, blinding amount of illumination. Doing that on a massive, dusty battlefield set is a logistical nightmare.
Throwing money at a problem doesn't make it art.
That isn't a studio playing it safe. That is mental ambition. They hired James Pasevi and Cedric Gibbons as art directors. They had John Arnold, a genius on photography. Joseph W. Farnham doing the titles. They weren't making a cheap pamphlet. They were building an absolute epic.
Mental ambition is one way to put it. Throwing a fortune at the screen to distract the audience from a structurally flawed narrative is another.
Flawed narrative.
Because all that money, all that heavy two-strip Technicolor wizardry, all that talent was completely wasted on a film that fundamentally does not know what it wants to be.
What are you talking about? How does it not know what it wants to be?
The structure is a complete mess. The film is practically bifurcated. It is split right down the middle into two entirely different movies that do not belong together.
It's a progression.
You have the first half, and then you have the second half. And that first half, it is a bloody shambles. It is almost unwatchable.
Oh, come on. That is ridiculously harsh.
No, let's look at the actual plot. The first half of this supposedly gritty war epic is a lyrical comedy. It is incredibly naive. It is stuffed full of the most tired cliches.
They weren't cliches in 1925.
You've got Jim Apperson, played by John Gilbert. Who is he? He is the idle, spoiled son of a wealthy Southern mill owner. You see his parents, played by Hobart Bosworth and Claire McDowell, swanning around in high society.
Establishing his background.
Then Jim enlists, goes to the rear lines in France, and who are his best mates? Slim Jensen, a tough-as-nails steelworker, played by Carl Dane, and Below Hera, a rough Bowery bartender, played by Tom O'Brien.
Yes, the cross-section of America.
It is the most paint-by-numbers, cross-class camaraderie trope imaginable. The rich boy, the steelworker, and the bartender walk into a trench. It sounds like the setup to a terrible pub joke.
Hear me out. You were looking at it with a century of cinematic hindsight, rolling your eyes and calling it a trope.
Because it is a trope.
But in 1925, showing that level of class mixing on a massive screen, showing these disparate men forced together by the great leveler of the draft, was essential. It establishes the baseline of American identity at the time. It shows who was actually fighting.
It is rather dull, is what it is. It is a lightweight sitcom set behind the front lines. And don't even get me started on the romance subplot.
The romance is beautiful.
Jim meets the young French peasant woman, Melisande, played by Renée Adoré. And how does our worldly American hero bridge the vast cultural divide with this local girl?
I know what you're going to say.
He demonstrates the joys of chewing gum.
Yes, it is a beautiful scene.
It is embarrassing. It is a naive, culturally condescending, trite little scene. An American soldier showing a French peasant how to chew gum like he is handing down fire from Mount Olympus.
You are being so cynical about a moment of genuine human connection.
There's practically no narrative value there. It is a complete waste of runtime before the actual war starts.
Hold your horses. You are so desperate for this to be a cynical, gritty documentary from minute one that you are completely ignoring basic human psychology and narrative structure.
I'm asking for consistency in tone.
The chewing gum scene is spot on. I will tell you exactly why. If you start the film in the mud, in the blood, with artillery shells blowing people to pieces, the audience's brain just shuts down.
They managed it in later films.
They go numb to the violence. You have to understand who these boys were before the industrial meat grinder got hold of them. You absolutely need the naive, chewing gum sharing innocence of the rear echelon.
I disagree completely.
You need to see the wealthy mill owner's boy trading stupid jokes with a Bowery bartender and flirting clumsily with a local girl. Why? To make the horror of the front line actually hit home.
It's cheap manipulation.
If you don't love them when they're chewing gum, you will not care when their bodies are being destroyed. It is structurally necessary to break your heart later.
You can establish empathy and character without resorting to a romantic comedy about confectionery. It feels incredibly disjointed.
It's contrast.
You have this light, fluffy, almost farcical first half, and then suddenly the tone just snaps entirely. It is tonal whiplash.
But that snap is the whole point. That is the genius of it. Because even if you hated the chewing gum, even if you thought the first half was a bit slow, you absolutely cannot deny the sheer power of what happens on the day of the offensive.
It does violently shift, I will give you that much.
The dramatic parting with Melisande. That is the pivot point of the entire film. That is where the innocence dies.
The tone pivots hard, yes.
Violently. That's the perfect word for it. From that exact moment, King Vidor, his cinematographer John Arnold, and his editor Hugh Wynn, they just escalate the psychological and physical horror in every single frame.
Visually, it gets interesting, sure.
This is where the film transcends the era and becomes a masterpiece. Think about how the advance of the woods is captured. The soldiers advance in a quote-unquote silent minuet, and then they are mercilessly mown down by unseen enemy fire.
The staging is quite formal.
A silent minuet. It is chilling. And the editing, the rapid-fire cuts, they're explicitly designed to mimic the rhythm of a steam engine.
The rhythmic editing is an interesting technical exercise, yes.
Interesting. It is revolutionary. Think about how Wynn physically had to do that. He is taking scissors to the celluloid. He cuts a shot of the troops to, say, 16 frames. That's about a second.
Basic metric montage.
Then the cut to the machine guns is 12 frames. Then 8 frames. Then 4 frames. Then 2 frames. The flashes of imagery on the screen get faster and faster and faster.
I know how montage works.
It forces your own human heartbeat, your own respiration, to sync up with the mechanical, industrial rhythm of modern warfare. The steam engine. It is the visual representation of the machine age destroying the human body.
It's an effective technique for the period.
And film historians unequivocally state that this grand, horrific vision has not been surpassed by any later war film. They explicitly name modern giants. They put it above Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan and Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. Vidor's vision is considered superior.
That is absolutely mental.
It's true.
I'm sorry, but that is severe, blinding nostalgia bias from critics who spend too much time in dusty archive.
You just refuse to give it credit.
You cannot sit there and tell me with a straight face that a 1925 silent film employing some rapid cuts and a bit of rhythmic walking surpasses the uncompromising, visceral, blood-curdling reality of the Omaha Beach landing in Saving Private Ryan.
It absolutely does.
You cannot compare a hand-cranked silent movie to modern sound design and special effects.
I'm telling you exactly that.
Then you are romanticizing the past. Are you joking? Malick's The Thin Red Line is a profound philosophical meditation on nature and destruction supported by incredible technology.
And Vidor did it first without the technology.
Spielberg practically reinvented combat cinema by showing the terrifying, deafening chaos of a bullet hitting flesh. Vidor gives us a silent minuet.
Yes, a silent minuet.
Yes, the image of soldiers walking rhythmically in a line into machine gun fire is a striking image. It is a decent theatrical metaphor, but to say it surpasses modern, uncompromising productions is just critical hyperbole.
It is not hyperbole.
It is what film historians say to justify spending their lives watching silent movies instead of engaging with modern art.
That is rubbish, mate. You are fundamentally confusing more blood and louder explosions with better filmmaking.
No, I am talking about visceral realism.
Spielberg gives you the literal physical horror of a bullet tearing through a body. It's visceral, sure. But Vidor gives you the psychological horror of an entire generation marching in a synchronized dance into a meat grinder.
It's too choreographed.
The silent minuet isn't just a metaphor. It's a visual representation of the absolute madness of the orders they were given. They are walking into certain death like it is a formal, polite dance because the generals told them to.
I understand the symbolism.
That is pure cinema. You don't need a $100 million sound design budget to make that terrifying. The silence of the film actually makes it worse. It traps you in the nightmare.
It doesn't trap you, it distances you. It makes it highly theatrical. It turns the brutal reality of a trench into a stage play. It becomes abstract.
Exactly. And that abstraction reaches its absolute peak in the night sequence. Let's look at the night sequence, because it is universally praised as the highest level of realist cinema of the time.
Realist. It's highly expressionist.
You have this nightmarish, near abstract pattern of shell holes covering the battlefield.
I will concede one point here. The visual design of those shell holes is striking. James Bisevi and Cedric Gibbons did good work building that set.
Thank you.
It looks completely alien. It looks like the surface of the moon, which I suppose accurately reflects the profound alienation and disorientation of the soldiers.
Right. It is an alien landscape. And in this dark, terrifying landscape, you have Slim the Tough steelworker making a tragic, single-handed attempt to destroy an enemy mortar under the cover of darkness.
And he dies, predictably.
He goes out and he doesn't come back. And then you have Jim Sorty. Jim goes out into the dark. This is the crucial moment of the whole film. This is the moral trap.
It's certainly a plot point.
Jim goes out. And what happens? Does he act like a traditional Hollywood hero? Does he save the day? No. His nerve totally fails him.
Which is incredibly convenient for the plot they want to construct.
Convenient. It is devastating. It is honest. His nerve fails. He panics in the dark. He recklessly throws himself into a crater at the Germans, and he ends up lying severely wounded next to a dying enemy soldier.
Right, here we go.
An enemy soldier who is his exact same age? Think out the massive subversion of expectations there. Jim is an ordinary man. He is not the master of his fate.
He's just a passenger in the script.
He cannot shoot his way out of this. He is deeply affected by massive geopolitical events he cannot control. Lying in the mud next to a dying German boy who looks just like him, that is properly genius visual storytelling. It strips away all the flag-waving nationalism in one silent image.
It is a bit overhyped, if you ask me.
Overhyped.
Yes. Put yourself in Jim's shoes for a second. Try to actually imagine the reality of that situation. Do you reckon you'd stay quiet if you were cowering in a shell hole, your nerve failing, surrounded by the enemy in the pitch black with artillery going off?
The silence is part of the cinematic language.
The idea that his nerve just fails in this perfectly poetic, theatrical way so he can dramatically throw himself into a crater with a German, it feels incredibly staged. It lacks the messy reality of panic.
It distills the reality into an image.
And dying next to the enemy of the exact same age? Come on. That is the oldest, most heavy-handed, melodramatic trope in the entire anti-war playbook.
It wasn't a trope then.
Oh, look at us. We are not so different, you and I. It is incredibly on the nose. It is practically winking at the audience.
It was 1925. You're calling it a tired trope now, sitting in the 21st century. But who do you think invented the trope? Vidor is establishing the very language of the anti-war film right there in that crater.
But for a film that supposedly operates free from polemics, as you claimed earlier, that is a massive, screaming polemic.
It's not a polemic to show humanity.
Pointing a camera at a bleeding German boy and saying to the audience, look, he is exactly like your son, is a massive political statement. It is not objective indifference. It is a clear, highly calculated emotional manipulation.
Through what?
It completely contradicts the director's own claim that he was just a neutral moderator holding a lens.
I disagree completely. Showing that a German teenager bleeds the exact same way an American teenager bleeds isn't a political polemic, it is a biological fact. It is objective reality.
It's deployed politically.
A polemic would be having Jim stand up in the crater and deliver a 5-minute title card monologue about the evils of the Kaiser and the need for international brotherhood. Instead, they just lie there, bleeding into the mud. That is moderation.
I wouldn't call that moderation.
That is the moderator stepping back and saying to the audience, here is the physical result of your war. Look at it.
Well, let's talk about the result of the war then. Let's move past the crater and talk about the epilogue.
The epilogue is brilliant.
Because if you want to talk about King Vidor compromising his grand artistic vision, this is the smoking gun. This proves who is really in charge.
The epilogue is a masterpiece of tragedy. It is heartbreaking.
The epilogue is a complete and utter studio cop-out. Look at the facts of the production. Jim returns to the United States as a bitterly experienced, physically broken invalid.
Which is incredibly brave to show.
He has lost his innocence, he has severe physical trauma, he has lost his friends. But what does the director do with this broken man? The production history in our sources shows that Vidor had to comply with the conservative, puritanical mores of the 1920s.
Yes, the censorship boards were strict.
The censorship boards and the studio dictated that he could not allow his hero, who was completely disenchanted with post-war life in America, any hope of returning to his beloved Melisande in France.
Right.
The moral codes of the era wouldn't allow it. The whole film is compromised by the local decency leagues and the MGM boardroom.
Wait. You're looking at this the wrong way.
Now, let me finish this point, because it is absolutely crucial to understanding why this film is a product, not a pure vision.
It is a vision.
If King Vidor was this perceptive, honest, unflinching director that you claim he is, why does he let the conservative moral panic of the 1920s dictate the ending of his supposedly uncompromising film?
He didn't have a choice.
Exactly. If it is a true portrayal of modern war, the ending should follow the psychological truth of the characters, not the commercial truth of Irving Thalberg's spreadsheet. It ruins the integrity of the piece. It proves my entire point that this was a factory product first and foremost.
You are looking at the restriction as a failure, but I am arguing that the restriction accidentally created a far better, far darker film.
Are you joking? You are honestly arguing that studio censorship made the art better.
Hear me out. Think about the alternative. What is the ending you actually want?
An honest one.
Jim gets on a boat, goes back to France, finds Melisande, they embrace in the ruins of the French countryside, and love conquers all. It is a fairy tale. Would a happy ending in France have made it a better movie, or just a more comfortable, palatable one for the audience?
It would have been the honest ending if that is what the narrative demanded and if that's what the director originally wanted.
But the reality, for the vast majority of those boys, was that they didn't get to go back. They didn't get the girl. They came back to America. They were fundamentally broken by what they had seen. They were missing limbs, and they were stuck in a society that didn't understand them.
I am not denying the historical reality of the veterans.
They didn't want to hear about it, and the country just wanted to move on to the Roaring '20s. They were trapped. Jim being trapped in the United States, an invalid with absolutely no hope of ever returning to the one pure thing he found, makes it the ultimate anti-war tragedy.
It's a convenient tragedy.
The studio forced Vidor to keep Jim in America, but in doing so, they forced Jim into a purgatory that perfectly mirrors the actual devastating post-war experience of the Lost Generation.
It is accidentally brilliant.
That is an incredible amount of mental gymnastics to justify studio interference.
It's not gymnastics, it's textual analysis. You are actively praising the film for an artistic choice that the director was literally forced to make against his will by men in suits. He was not allowed to give his hero hope. That is a strict external limitation. It is a flaw in the creative process.
Art is born from limitations.
To look at a commercially mandated flaw and call it brilliant feature is just, well, it is willful blindness to the reality of the 1920s studio system. You are projecting your own modern interpretation onto a corporate mandate.
It is not mental gymnastics. It is looking at the text as it exists on the screen today. The art survives the compromise. Sometimes the friction between the artist and the studio creates sparks.
Sparks, sure. Not a cohesive masterpiece.
The tragedy is deepened immensely by the fact that he is cut off from his love. Think about the entire structure we just argued about. The first half, the chewing gum, the lyrical comedy you hated so much. That was the setup.
The poorly paced setup.
Melisande represents the pure humanity he found amidst the chaos. The second half, the silent minuet, destroys his body and his mind, and the epilogue denies him the humanity he left behind. It is a perfect, devastating, deeply cynical three-act structure.
A three-act structure engineered by Irving Thalberg, cutting 300 meters of vital film, leaning entirely on a script stolen from Lawrence Stallings' actual trauma, and bound tightly by the moral panic of the 1920s censorship boards.
You are impossible. You just completely refuse to let anything be genuinely great. You have to tear it down.
I refuse to let nostalgia dictate what is great. I'm looking at the facts. And the facts tell a story of a compromised, bifurcated film that happens to have a few visually striking moments of rapid-fire editing and some abstract shell holes, which you are aggressively elevating to the level of divine cinematic intervention.
And I am saying that when you put all those pieces together, the terrifying silent minuet, the brilliant mirror image of the enemy in the crater, the devastating, suffocating isolation of the epilogue, you get a film that absolutely justifies its place as the second highest grossing silent film in history.
Box office doesn't equal quality.
Not because it was cheap isolationist propaganda, but because it told the brutal, unflinching truth to a traumatized generation that desperately needed to see their pain acknowledged on a massive screen.
Well, I think we are just going to have to leave that tension right there, because we are clearly not going to agree on Vidor's purity or his intentions.
Clearly not.
But I want to leave you, listening right now, with a serious question to chew on. Ask yourself this, and be brutally honest when you think about it.
Oh, boy.
Do we only worship these 1920s films because they got there first? Do we give them a free pass because they laid the mechanical groundwork with their wooden tracks and their hand cranks? Or do they actually survive the harsh, unforgiving light of a modern screen? If you put The Big Parade next to the uncompromising war films of today, does it actually hold up as a masterpiece? Or are we just making excuses for a 90-year-old sanitized studio product?
I reckon it holds up beautifully, and it hits harder than half the CGI nonsense out today.
Yeah.
But if you want to decide for yourself, if you actually have the spine for the real history, the real credits, and the gritty context of what these filmmakers were fighting against, grab a copy of Cinema, the Magic Vehicle.
Yes, read the book.
Because clearly some people can read the exact same book and still manage to entirely miss the absolute genius of King Vidor.
Oh, come off it. He wasn't a genius. He was a highly competent craftsman working for Sahlberg's machine. You are mistaking a good employee for a visionary.
A craftsman. Are you joking? He essentially invented the visual language of the anti-war film. Without Vidor, you don't get Kubrick, you don't get Malick, you don't get Spielberg.
You are doing it again. You are completely romanticizing the timeline. Stallings gave him the story. Arnold gave him the camera work. Wynn gave him the rhythm.
And Vidor gave it the soul. If you can't see the soul in that night sequence, if you can't feel the panic in that crater.
The panic was manufactured in a backlot.